The weak princess and her strange gift. The grand hall of Selphar Prime was filled with silence. Thousands of alien nobles stood in perfect rows, their golden armor shining under the massive crystal chandeliers. In the center of the throne room sat Monarch Zorkai, the ruler of the Selphar Empire. His tall, muscular frame radiated power, and his piercing silver eyes held no warmth. Today was a special day. It was Princess Lyra's 20th name day, a day when royal children received gifts to prove their worth. But Lyra was not like other Selphar warriors. She was small, weak, and fragile. In a race where strength was everything, she was an embarrassment. The nobles whispered about her behind her back, calling her the useless one. Even her own father rarely looked at her, and now, as she stood before the throne, she could feel the weight of their stares. Then Monarch Zorkai raised a hand, and the doors to the hall swung open with a heavy creak. The guards dragged something inside. A man wrapped in chains. Lyra's eyes widened. The human. The creature stood tall despite the heavy chains. His face was covered in dirt, but his sharp blue eyes were clear and full of something Lyra didn't expect: defiance. "This," the monarch's deep voice echoed, "is your gift, daughter." A murmur spread through the hall. A human as a gift. Lyra's hands clenched into fists. Other royals had received warships, weapons, or entire planets on their name days. But she was given a slave. "This human is from the Terran race," the monarch continued. "They are weak but stubborn creatures. I gift him to you, Lyra, so you may use him as you wish." Lyra felt her face burn with humiliation. She was already seen as weak, and now she was being given something even weaker than herself. Was this a joke? The chained human suddenly let out a short laugh. It was quiet, almost amused, but in the silent hall, it echoed like thunder. Lyra looked at him, confused. The nobles gasped. A slave dared to laugh in the presence of the monarch. One of the guards raised his metal staff and struck the human across the back. He grunted in pain but did not fall. He just smiled. "You find this funny?" Lyra asked, stepping forward. The human turned his sharp gaze to her. "I just find it interesting," he said. His voice was rough, but his words were calm. "I expected a beast, but I see a girl who looks more afraid than me." Lyra stiffened. A low hiss ran through the crowd. Did this human just insult the princess? Her father's face remained emotionless, but she knew he was watching closely. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. "You are my property now," she said firmly. "You will obey me." The human tilted his head slightly, as if examining her. Then, with a smirk, he said, "We'll see." The guards moved to drag him away, but Lyra stopped them. "Wait." She turned to her father. "What is his name?" The monarch waved a hand carelessly. "What does it matter? He is a human." Lyra looked at the human again. His expression remained unreadable, but something about his eyes made her feel uneasy. After a moment, he answered for himself. "Jace Carter. A human name. Strange, simple, but strong in a way she didn't understand." "Very well," she said. "Take him to my chambers. I will deal with him myself." The guards nodded and dragged Jace away. As he passed Lyra, he whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "You think you own me, little princess, but soon you'll see. The strongest chains are the ones in your mind." Lyra shivered. For the first time in her life, she felt something other than weakness. She felt curiosity. Later that night, inside her private chambers, Lyra paced back and forth. Jace was sitting on the floor, his chains still wrapped around his wrists. She had expected him to be afraid, or at least quiet. But instead, he studied the room like a warrior planning an escape. "You should know," Lyra said, crossing her arms. "Escaping is impossible. My father's guards are everywhere." Jace smirked. "Good to know." She frowned. "You don't act like a slave." "That's because I'm not one," he said. Lyra rolled her eyes. You belong to me now. You will do as I say. Jace leaned back against the cold metal wall. And if I don't? She stepped closer, looking him directly in the eyes. Then I will make sure you regret it. To her surprise, Jace chuckled. Lyra was used to people fearing her family name. But this human, he wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he looked at her like he knew something she didn't. Then, in a low, steady voice, he said something that sent chills down her spine. You think I'm weak because I'm human, Jace said. But the truth is, you don't know what humans are capable of. Lyra hesitated. For the first time, doubt crept into her mind. Who exactly was Jace Carter? And why did she have a feeling that this human was about to change everything? The human who refused to kneel. The twin moons of Selphar Prime cast a pale glow over the royal palace. Inside Princess Lyra's private chambers, an eerie silence filled the space. Jace Carter, the human prisoner, sat on the cold stone floor, his arms still wrapped in heavy chains. His expression was unreadable. His posture was relaxed, but his sharp blue eyes observed everything. The towering crystal walls, the energy barriers on the windows, and the locked door guarded by Selphar warriors. Lyra stood before him, arms crossed. She had spent her life surrounded by people who either feared her or pitied her. But this human, he did neither. It irritated her. You should be afraid, she said finally, breaking the silence. Jace tilted his head slightly, amused. Afraid of what? A princess who needs a slave to feel powerful. Lyra's jaw tightened. You misunderstand. You are no more than a gift, property. My father gave you to me because you are beneath me. If you do not obey, you will suffer. Jace chuckled softly. Then do it. Make me suffer. Lyra blinked. No one had ever challenged her like this before. She stepped forward and pressed a small button on her wristband. A sharp shockwave pulsed through Jace's chains, sending a jolt of electricity through his body. Jace's muscles tensed, his jaw clenched, but he did not scream. He exhaled slowly, eyes locking onto hers. That all you got? He muttered. Lyra's hands trembled slightly. She had expected cries of pain, maybe even begging. Instead, Jace Carter had the audacity to smile. Her mind raced. How was this human resisting? Even trained Selphar warriors would collapse under that much pain. Jace leaned back against the wall, his breathing heavy but steady. You think chains make a person weak? He asked. You think pain makes someone obedient? Lyra hesitated. Jace smirked. You know nothing about humans. The next morning, Lyra didn't sleep that night. She kept watching Jace from a distance, trying to understand him. The next morning, she ordered the guards to take him to the warriors' courtyard, a vast training ground where Selphar soldiers practiced combat. The other warriors gathered around, their golden eyes filled with curiosity and scorn. A human. Here. Lyra stood on the raised platform and addressed them. This is Jace Carter, my new servant, she announced. But he refuses to kneel. He thinks himself strong. A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. The idea of a human being strong was absurd to them. Let us see what he is truly worth, she continued. Then she turned to Jace. Fight one of my warriors. If you win, you will have the right to speak freely in my presence. If you lose, you will never raise your eyes to me again. Jace grinned. Sounds fun. A massive Selphar warrior stepped forward. He was nearly 7 feet tall, his dark armor glinting under the sunlight. His name was Vorak, one of the palace's elite soldiers. Vorak sneered. Shall I kill him quickly, princess? Lyra hesitated. Did she want Jace dead? Before she could answer, Jace rolled his shoulders. Nah, take your time, he said casually. I could use a warm-up. Vorak growled. He lunged, his fist moving like a cannonball toward Jace's head. But Jace was already gone. He sidestepped effortlessly, his movements fast and precise. Before Vorak could recover, Jace delivered a sharp kick to the knee, making the massive warrior stumble. Gasps filled the courtyard. Vorak roared, throwing another punch, but Jace ducked, grabbing the alien's wrist and twisting it into a painful lock. Vorak screamed as his own arm bent at an unnatural angle. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. What was she seeing? Humans were supposed to be slow, weak, but Jace was faster than any Selphar she had ever seen. He wasn't just dodging, he was reading Vorak's movements like a seasoned warrior. Vorak snarled, rage fueling his strength. He swung wildly, but Jace used his own momentum against him, grabbing his arm and flipping him over his shoulder. The 7-foot-tall Selphar warrior crashed to the ground. Silence. Jace stepped back, barely breaking a sweat. He looked at Lyra and smirked. Guess that means I get to speak freely now. The Selphar soldiers stood frozen. Lyra's heart pounded. Jace had humiliated one of the strongest warriors in the palace, and he had done it without weapons, without armor, and in chains. Who was this human? Her father had given her a slave. But what if he had accidentally given her a warrior? Later that night, back in her chambers, Lyra stood near the window, staring at the twin moons. Behind her, Jace sat on the floor, still in chains but looking utterly at ease. "You should have lost today," she said without turning around. Jace stretched his arms. "Why?" "Because I'm human." She turned to face him. "Yes." Jace studied her for a moment. Then he sighed. "You Selphar think strength is only about muscles and power, but that's not true." Lyra frowned. "Then what is strength?" Jace met her gaze. "Survival." Lyra blinked. "Survival." Jace leaned forward slightly. "Humans weren't born strong like you, Selphar. We weren't built for war. But we survived. We adapted. We learned." His voice grew quieter, more intense. "You think chains can break me," he whispered. "I've been broken before. I've been beaten, starved, tortured. And every time, I came back stronger." Lyra stared at him, for once at a loss for words. This human was dangerous, not because of his fists, but because of his mind. And for the first time, Lyra felt something new. Not anger, not irritation. Respect. The secret training begins. The Selphar Palace was quiet at night. The twin moons of Selphar Prime cast a pale glow over the towering crystal walls, their light flickering against the darkened halls. The grand corridors, usually filled with the footsteps of warriors, now felt eerily empty. Inside Princess Lyra's chambers, however, silence was the last thing that filled the air. Jace Carter sat cross-legged on the cold stone floor, his chains still wrapped around his wrists. Across from him, Lyra stood motionless, watching him. She had spent the last few hours replaying the fight from earlier in her mind. Jace had done the impossible. He had defeated one of her father's elite warriors while still in chains. He had moved faster than anyone she had ever seen. And most importantly, he had refused to kneel. No one had ever disrespected a Selphar royal like that and lived. And yet, Jace sat there, completely at ease, as if this alien world was his own. Lyra narrowed her golden eyes. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Jace tilted his head. "You expect me to just tell you?" She stepped forward. "If you don't, I have ways to make you talk." Jace smirked. "You tried that already, remember?" He lifted his chained hand slightly. "Didn't work." Lyra clenched her fists. This human was infuriating, but he was also different from any other creature she had ever encountered. A strange thought crept into her mind. A dangerous one. What if she could learn from him? A dangerous proposal. "You think you are strong," Lyra said after a long pause. "But strength is nothing without purpose." Jace raised an eyebrow. "That so?" She hesitated. The words forming in her mind were forbidden, dangerous. If her father ever found out, she would be punished severely. But she needed to know. "I want you to train me," she said finally. Jace blinked. Then he laughed. It wasn't a mocking laugh, but one of genuine amusement. "You?" he asked, leaning forward. "A Sulfar princess. You want a human to train you?" Lyra's face burned with frustration. "You are the only one who has fought differently from my people. You use techniques I have never seen before. If I can learn them, I can become stronger." Jace studied her carefully. He was quiet for a moment, as if measuring the weight of her words. Then he leaned back against the wall, a smirk still playing on his lips. "All right, princess. I'll make you a deal." Lyra frowned. "A deal?" "You take these chains off," Jace said, rattling his wrists. "And I'll teach you how to really fight." Silence stretched between them. Lyra hesitated. She could not trust him. If she freed him, he might escape. He might kill her. But something in his eyes told her otherwise. He wasn't afraid of her. He wasn't trying to manipulate her. He just wanted a fair fight. Finally, she pressed a button on her wristband. A soft click echoed through the room as the chains unlocked and fell away. Jace rubbed his wrists, flexing his fingers. "That's better." Then, without warning, he lunged at her. The first lesson: pain. Lyra's instincts kicked in, and she jumped back, raising her hands defensively. But Jace moved too fast. Before she could react, he was behind her. His foot swept under hers, knocking her off balance. She hit the ground hard, gasping as the impact knocked the air from her lungs. Jace crouched beside her, shaking his head. "Lesson 1, princess," he said. "You're too predictable." Lyra gritted her teeth. She had never been thrown down so easily. Her Sulfar instructors had trained her in the way of strength. Powerful, direct attacks meant to overwhelm enemies. But Jace fought differently. He didn't just use strength. He used speed, precision, strategy. She pushed herself up, fire burning in her chest. Again. Jace grinned. "That's the spirit." For the next hour, Lyra learned what it meant to fight like a human. She tried attacking first, throwing a punch aimed at his ribs. Jace dodged effortlessly. She attempted a grappling maneuver. He reversed it in an instant, flipping her onto her back. Every time she thought she had him, he was already 2 steps ahead. She had never felt more frustrated. And yet, she had never felt more alive. A hidden strength. After what felt like an eternity, Lyra finally landed a hit. Jace had gone easy on her, but she didn't care. Her elbow connected with his ribs, making him grunt in pain. For the first time, he looked impressed. "Not bad," he admitted. "You're learning." Lyra wiped sweat from her brow. "You fight differently than us," she admitted. Jace shrugged. "Your people rely on brute force. You expect every battle to be a contest of who is bigger and stronger." He stepped closer, his voice lower. "But humans, we don't have your strength. We don't have your size. So we learn to fight smarter." Lyra met his gaze, her mind racing. Everything she had been taught was wrong. Strength wasn't just about muscle. It was about control, speed, and intelligence. Jace had defeated an elite warrior with nothing but skill. If she could learn that, she could finally prove herself. Not just to her father, not just to the Sulfar Empire, but to herself. A dangerous future. The next few days passed in secret. By day, Lyra continued playing the role of the weak princess, obeying her father's orders and avoiding suspicion. By night, however, she trained in the shadows. Jace taught her how to move without being seen, how to strike with precision, and how to use an enemy's own strength against them. She was stronger than she had ever been, but danger loomed on the horizon. One night, as they trained, a voice suddenly echoed through the halls. "Princess." Lyra froze. Jace's eyes sharpened. It was one of her father's royal guards. Someone had seen them. And if they were caught, Lyra knew what would happen. Her father would execute Jace, and he would never forgive her. Betrayal and the arena of death. The air inside Selphar Prime's royal palace grew thick with tension. Lyra's heart pounded as the voice echoed down the hall. "Princess." Jace's eyes flickered toward the door. His body shifted, his muscles tensed, ready to react. For a split second, Lyra considered lying, telling the guard she was alone. But the heavy footsteps approaching shattered that hope. Whoever it was, they had already seen too much. The door slid open. A tall Selphar warrior stepped inside, his sharp golden eyes narrowing as he took in the sight before him. Princess Lyra, standing too close to the unchained human prisoner. It was Commander Xoreth, one of her father's most trusted enforcers. His gaze flicked to Jace, then to Lyra's sweat-soaked tunic. His expression darkened. What is the meaning of this? Jace took a slow step forward, his posture relaxed but ready. "You must be the welcoming committee," he said casually. Xoreth's gaze burned into him. Then realization struck. No chains, no bindings. His eyes widened with fury. "You freed him." Lyra knew she had only seconds before things escalated. "He is my servant," she said quickly, lifting her chin in defiance. "I will decide how to handle him." Xoreth's expression twisted in disgust. "A servant? This creature? He should be on his knees, begging for mercy." Jace smirked. "Not really my style." Xoreth's lip curled. "You disrespect the Selphar Empire with your very existence, human." His voice dropped into a venomous hiss. "And now, the princess does as well." Lyra froze. There was something deadly in his tone. Then, he reached for the communicator on his wrist. No. If he called the guards, Jace would be executed. Without thinking, Lyra lunged forward, grabbing his arm before he could press the alert button. "Wait," she gasped. Xoreth turned his furious eyes toward her. Lyra struggled to keep her voice steady. "There is another way." A long pause. Jace looked at her sharply. Xoreth's golden eyes flickered with suspicion. "What are you suggesting?" Lyra swallowed hard. Her father, the Monarch, believed in only one thing. Combat decided the strong and the weak. If she could frame this correctly, she could buy Jace a chance. "Trial by combat," she said, her voice unwavering. Xoreth blinked, caught off guard. Lyra continued quickly, forcing confidence into her tone. "He defeated Vorak in the courtyard. If he can fight and survive the arena, then my decision to train him will be justified." Xoreth let out a low growl. "You are playing a dangerous game, princess." Lyra held his gaze, not backing down. Finally, Xoreth exhaled, his lips curling into a cruel smile. "Very well," he sneered. "The human will fight." His gaze flicked to Jace. "Tomorrow at dawn, he will enter the arena of death." Then, without another word, he turned and left. The heavy doors sealed shut behind him. Silence. Lyra felt her breath shudder out of her chest. She turned to Jace, expecting him to be furious. Instead, he was grinning. She scowled. "You're about to be thrown into an arena where you'll have to fight for your life." Jace stretched his arms. "Yeah. And?" Lyra's jaw clenched. "You don't understand. The arena of death is not just a fight. It is a slaughter. You will be thrown against warriors bred for combat. Selphar elites, merciless and trained to kill." Jace's grin didn't fade. "Sounds fun." She wanted to yell at him, to tell him he was being a fool. But deep down, a part of her admired his confidence. Still, she knew the truth. Tomorrow, Jace Carter would die. The arena of death. The next morning, the massive Selphar Coliseum roared with the cheers of thousands. The arena of death was a sacred tradition, a place where warriors either proved their worth or were erased from existence. Lyra sat in the royal spectator's box, her stomach twisted in knots. Beside her, Monarch Zorkai sat on his throne, his expression unreadable. Jace stood in the center of the arena, his bare feet pressing into the hot sand. He wore no armor, no weapons, just simple combat gear. On the opposite side, his opponent emerged. Lyra's breath caught. Not one, not two, but 3 Excelfar gladiators. This wasn't a trial. This was an execution. The warriors were twice Jace's size, their reptilian bodies covered in thick, gleaming armor. Each held a different weapon, a double-bladed spear, an energy whip, and a plasma gauntlet that crackled with lethal energy. Lyra felt a cold chill run down her spine. This was unfair. Even for a trained Selfar, fighting 3 at once was nearly impossible. Jace, however, looked unbothered. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena. "Let the battle begin." The warriors charge. Jace did not move. Lyra's hands tightened on the armrest of her seat. "Move, Jace." The Selfar with the spear struck first, lunging at him with terrifying speed. And then, in the blink of an eye, Jace sidestepped, spun, and grabbed the spear mid-thrust. With a single smooth motion, he yanked it from his opponent's grasp and drove the butt of the spear into the warrior's stomach. The Excelfar collapsed. The crowd gasped. Lyra's eyes widened. What? The second warrior, the one with the energy whip, lashed out. The crackling blue whip snapped through the air, aiming for Jace's throat. Jace ducked. The whip passed over him, and before the Excelfar could pull it back, Jace lunged forward, grabbed the warrior's wrist, and twisted. The warrior screamed as his own whip wrapped around his arm, sending an electric shock through his body. He fell, convulsing. The third gladiator, wearing the plasma gauntlet, roared in fury. He swung a devastating punch at Jace's head. Jace barely moved. At the last second, he sidestepped, grabbed the Excelfar's arm, and forced it downward. The gauntlet discharged its energy directly into the warrior's own chest. He collapsed with a dull thud. The arena fell completely silent. Jace exhaled, rolling his shoulders. Not a single scratch on him. Then he looked up, directly at Monarch Zorkai, and to the shock of the entire Colosseum, Jace Carter lifted his chin and smirked. The princess awakens. The Excelfar Colosseum was frozen in silence. For the first time in its long history, a single unarmed human had defeated 3 Excelfar gladiators without suffering a single wound. The warriors who had trained for years, who had conquered planets, now lay motionless on the burning sands. And standing over them, breathing calmly, was Jace Carter. Then, the silence shattered. A wave of chaos erupted from the stands. Thousands of Selfar nobles, warriors, and spectators screamed in outrage. They threw their fists in the air, demanding Jace's execution. This is an insult. The fight was unfair. A human cannot defeat Selfar warriors. Lyra barely heard them. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Jace had won. Against all odds, against an unfair fight, against a battle meant to be an execution, he had survived. And now, he was staring directly at her father. Sitting beside her on the grand throne, Monarch Zorkai's golden eyes gleamed with something unreadable. He did not rise. He did not react. Instead, he spoke in a voice as cold as death itself. "Bring him before me, before the throne." Jace was dragged to the royal podium by 2 guards, though he hardly resisted. His arms were bound behind him once again, but his stance remained casual, as if this was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Lyra stood beside her father, her breath tight in her chest. Zorkai leaned forward on his throne, studying Jace like an insect beneath his boot. The crowd fell into a hush, waiting for the monarch's judgment. "Tell me, human," Zorkai said, his voice calm but dangerous. "How did you survive?" Jace tilted his head slightly. "I fought smarter." A murmur rippled through the crowd. No one spoke to the monarch like that. Zorkai's expression didn't change. "You were meant to die today." Jace smirked. "Yeah, I got that impression." Lyra's hands clenched. Why was he provoking her father? Did he want to be executed? Zorke's fingers tapped slowly against the armrest of his throne. He was thinking, calculating. Then he glanced at Lyra. "Tell me, daughter," he said, "was this your plan?" Lyra stiffened. The moment she had feared was here. If she answered incorrectly, her father could have her imprisoned, or worse. But she did not lower her gaze. This was her chance. "Jace Carter is not weak," she said, her voice steady. "He is proof that strength is more than brute power." Gasps. Zorke's expression remained unreadable. The nobles and warriors hissed in disbelief. "You defend this creature?" the monarch asked. Lyra forced herself to nod. "He won by your own laws. He survived the arena of death. His victory was earned." Jace's smirk grew slightly. Zorke exhaled slowly. Then he laughed. A deep, chilling laugh that sent shivers down Lyra's spine. The monarch rose to his full height. "Very well." He raised a hand to silence the crowd. "The human will not be executed." A stunned silence followed. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. But then, Zorke's gaze darkened. "Instead, he will be sent to the war trials." The war trials. Jace sat in the dimly lit holding chamber, bound in new restraints, as Lyra paced in front of him. "You could have been executed," she hissed. Jace shrugged. "Could have. Wasn't." Lyra stopped, glaring at him. "You don't understand what my father just did." Jace leaned back against the wall. "Enlighten me, princess." Lyra took a deep breath. The war trials. A brutal series of combat challenges designed to push warriors to their absolute limit. Most who entered never came back. And now, Jace was being thrown into them. She had to warn him. The trials are not just fights. They test your endurance, your survival skills. "Good," Jace interrupted. Lyra's frustration boiled over. "You think this is a game?" Jace's smirk faded. He leaned forward slightly. "No, Lyra. I think this is an opportunity." She frowned. "Opportunity for what?" Jace's blue eyes locked onto hers. "To prove that humans are more than what your father believes." Her breath caught. Something about the way he said it, so calm, so certain, made her believe him. "But still, I can't protect you in the war trials," she admitted. Jace grinned. "I don't need protection." Trial 1. The Labyrinth of Blood. The next morning, Jace was led to the first trial. The Labyrinth of Blood was a massive underground arena filled with shifting walls, hidden traps, and creatures from across the galaxy. Lyra stood in the spectator stands, her heart pounding as the trial began. A massive Selphar war beast was released into the maze. It stood 12 feet tall, its thick reptilian hide covered in bioarmor, its 6 glowing red eyes scanning the shadows for prey. Jace was its prey. A deafening roar shook the walls. The beast charged. Jace ran. Lyra's nails dug into her palms. He can't win this. Then, Jace did something unexpected. Instead of running aimlessly, he climbed. He scaled the broken stone walls of the maze with precision, keeping high ground as the beast surged below. He wasn't panicking. He was analyzing. Lyra's eyes widened. He's planning something. Then, in one swift motion, he leaped directly onto the war beast's back. The crowd screamed in disbelief as Jace wrapped his arms around the beast's throat, cutting off its airflow. The creature thrashed, roaring in fury. But Jace held on. Lyra's pulse raced. The beast's movements slowed. And then, with one final shudder, it collapsed. Jace stood over it, breathing heavily. Then he looked up at the monarch's throne and bowed, but not in submission. In mockery. The arena erupted into chaos. The rebellion begins. The war beast lay motionless on the arena floor, its body twitching as the last remnants of life faded away. And standing atop its back, breathing heavily but victorious, was Jace Carter. Lyra's heartbeat pounded in her ears. She barely registered the deafening uproar from the stands. Some were cheering, most were furious, but all were shocked. Jace had just defeated the first trial of the War Games. A human. A Turan. A species that Selphar Empire considered nothing more than weak, fragile, lesser beings, had hunted and slain one of the deadliest creatures in the known galaxy. And now he was mocking them. He bowed. Not in submission, in defiance. Lyra's father, Monarch Zor-Kai, sat stone-faced on his throne. His piercing golden eyes bore into Jace like a predator studying prey. Then, after a long silence, he spoke. "Take him away." The guards rushed in, surrounding Jace with plasma rifles drawn, but he didn't resist. He just smirked, allowing himself to be led back through the arena gates. Lyra exhaled, her mind racing. This is getting dangerous. Jace wasn't just surviving. He was winning. And worse, he was making a statement. If he kept this up, the people of Selphar Prime wouldn't just see him as an anomaly. They would start to see him as a threat, a symbol. And symbols started rebellions. The chains that bind. The prison cell was cold, dark, and silent. The thick metal bars hummed with an energy field designed to keep even the strongest warriors contained. Jace sat on the floor, resting his back against the wall, staring at the ceiling as if he were bored. The door slid open, and Lyra stepped inside. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Jace smirked. "Here to congratulate me." Lyra folded her arms. "You're lucky to still be alive." Jace tilted his head. "I told you I don't need luck." She exhaled sharply, stepping closer. "Jace, you don't understand what's happening. You think this is just about you proving the point. My father doesn't see you as a warrior. He sees you as an infection, something that needs to be removed." Jace's smirk faded slightly. Lyra lowered her voice. "If you keep this up, you won't just die. You'll ignite something bigger than yourself." Jace met her gaze, his blue eyes unreadable. Maybe that's the point. Lyra's stomach tightened. No, he understands exactly what he's doing. Jace wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for something more. She wasn't sure what yet, but it terrified her. Before she could say anything else, the prison door slammed open behind her. A towering Selphar general entered, flanked by two heavily armed guards. Commander Torith. His cold gaze flicked over Jace before settling on Lyra. "The Monarch summons you." Lyra hesitated. "Why?" Soreth's lips curled into a smirk. "Because your father has decided the human's next trial." A cold weight settled in Lyra's chest. Something felt wrong. She turned back to Jace. "Don't do anything reckless," she whispered. Jace grinned. "Can't make any promises." Then the guards shoved Lyra out of the cell. The door sealed shut behind her. The trial of the gauntlet. When Lyra entered the royal war chamber, she knew something was different. Her father, Monarch Zor-Kai, stood before a massive holographic display, observing a war map of Selphar space. Beside him stood his generals, advisors, and high-ranking nobles. The tension in the room was suffocating. Zor-Kai turned to face her. His expression was unreadable. "Daughter," he said smoothly, "do you know why I summoned you?" Lyra took a steady breath. "To discuss the human's next trial." Zor-Kai's lips twitched slightly, as if amused. "Not just that." He waved a hand, and the holographic war map shifted. A new planet appeared. A Terran colony. Lyra's breath caught. "No." Zor-Kai's voice remained calm and deliberate. "For too long, the Terrans have been tolerated." His golden eyes gleamed. "But now, they are becoming a problem." Lyra clenched her fists. "You're planning an attack." Her father nodded. "We cannot allow weakness to spread." Her pulse thundered in her ears. This wasn't just about Jace. Her father wanted to wipe out humanity. And she had just handed him the perfect excuse. Jace had humiliated Selfar warriors. Jace had survived where he should have died. Now, Zor-K would use that as proof that humans were growing dangerous. Lyra took a step forward. "This is a mistake." The general stiffened. Her father turned to her slowly. "Excuse me." She forced herself to stand tall. "The human won fairly. He has proven himself strong. And you yourself have always said strength should be respected." Silence. Then, Zor-K smiled. Not with warmth, but with something colder, sharper. "Very well," he said. "If you believe in his strength, then let us put it to the ultimate test." Lyra's heart stopped. Her father turned to the generals. "The human's next trial will be the gauntlet." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Lyra's blood ran cold. The gauntlet was a death sentence. A massive war-torn battlefield, filled with Selfar's most brutal warriors. A trial where combatants were hunted, beaten, and executed, one by one. No one had ever survived it. Not even Selfar. And now, Jace Carter was being thrown into a war zone. A choice must be made. That night, Lyra stood in the shadows of the palace, her mind racing. Jace was going to die. Unless... Her hands trembled as she gripped the small communication device hidden inside her cloak. She had spent her entire life following the rules, obeying her father. But now, she had a choice. She could watch Jace die, or she could do something unthinkable. Betray the Selfar Empire. Her fingers hovered over the transmitter. She had one chance to send an anonymous warning to the Terran resistance. One chance to start a rebellion. Her breathing slowed. And then, she pressed the button. The rise of the warrior queen. The moment Lyra pressed the button, there was no turning back. The small transmission beacon in her hands pulsed once, sending a silent distress signal into the void, toward the Terran resistance. For the first time in her life, she had defied the Selfar Empire. And soon, the consequences would come crashing down. The gauntlet begins. The next day, the Selfar war trials reached their final stage. Jace Carter stood in the center of a vast battlefield, surrounded by twisted metal, crumbling war machines, and the remains of ancient battles. The gauntlet wasn't just an arena, it was a graveyard of warriors past. Above, the twin suns burned high in the sky, casting long shadows across the ruined landscape. Lyra watched from the Royal Observation Tower, her heart hammering in her chest. Hundreds of Selfar warriors and hunters were positioned across the battlefield. Every single one of them had a mission. Kill Jace Carter. A massive holographic countdown appeared in the sky. 10. Jace stretched his arms, rolling his shoulders as if this was just another morning jog. 9. The warriors tightened their grips on their plasma rifles, energy swords, and serrated daggers. 8. Jace exhaled slowly, his sharp blue eyes scanning the battlefield like a predator searching for weaknesses. 7. The crowd of Selfar nobles chanted for blood. 6. Lyra's nails dug into her palms. 5. Jace's smirk disappeared, his stance shifted. 4. The Selfar hunters raised their weapons. 3. Lyra whispered under her breath, "Run." 2. Jace's fingers twitched. 1. A deep mechanical horn blasted through the air. And then, all hell broke loose. The hunt begins. The first shot came from Jace's left. A plasma bolt sliced through the air, but he had already moved. Jace rolled forward, grabbing a chunk of fallen debris and using it as a temporary shield. The bolt melted straight through it, but it bought him enough time. A Selfar warrior charge, swinging a massive war axe. Jace sidestepped at the last second, grabbing the warrior's wrist and twisting. With a sickening crack, the Selfar collapsed to the ground, screaming. 2 more soldiers rushed in. Jace ducked beneath a swinging blade, twisted his body, and delivered a brutal kick to the attacker's knee. The warrior collapsed, and in one smooth motion, Jace stole his plasma rifle. Now he was armed. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Blaster fire, explosions, screams. Jace moved like a shadow, weaving between fallen structures, using broken wreckage for cover. Every move he made was calculated, precise. He wasn't just surviving. He was fighting back. The turning point. From the royal balcony, Lyra couldn't breathe. Jace was doing the impossible, again. He wasn't just dodging, he was countering, disarming, defeating warriors who should have overwhelmed him. For every enemy that fell, another 3 took their place. Even Jace couldn't keep this up forever. And then, the trap was sprung. A loud mechanical whirring filled the battlefield as 6 massive energy barriers slammed into place, cutting off all escape routes. Lyra's eyes widened in horror. No, this wasn't just a test. This was an execution. From the far side of the battlefield, a massive metal gate opened. A deep, thunderous growl echoed through the arena. And then, it stepped forward. A Selphar war titan, 14 feet tall, clad in thick biosteel armor, 6 burning red eyes, twin energy cannons mounted on its shoulders. The crowd erupted in cheers. Jace stopped moving. For the first time since the war trials began, he looked uncertain. This wasn't just another enemy. This was a walking death machine. Lyra clenched her fists. She had been prepared to let this play out. She had trusted that Jace could handle himself. But this was murder. And she had had enough. The warrior queen rises. Lyra moved before she could think. In a blur, she spun around, snatched the plasma dagger from a guard's belt, and drove it straight into his side. The warrior crumpled, gasping in shock. The others barely had time to react before Lyra was already running. She vaulted over the balcony railing, free-falling into the battlefield below. The crowd screamed. The moment she landed, Selphar warriors turned their weapons on her. And she cut them down. For years, she had trained in the Selphar ways. But for weeks, Jace had been teaching her something else, how to fight smarter. She weaved through their attacks, striking where it hurt most, dodging, countering, breaking their stances. Jace saw her, and his eyes widened. "What the hell are you doing?" "Saving your reckless ass," she snapped, grabbing him by the wrist. The war titan roared behind them. Lyra pulled Jace forward. "Come on, we're getting out of here." The rebellion ignites. High above, Monarch Zor-Kai rose to his feet, his expression unreadable. The crowd was in chaos. His weak daughter, the princess he had dismissed, mocked, and ignored, was rebelling. And she wasn't alone. Because at that very moment, the sky above Selphar Prime exploded. Terran warships broke through the atmosphere, their cannons glowing hot. The resistance had arrived. Lyra had sent the distress call. And now, the war had begun. The final battle. The battlefield turned into absolute carnage. The Terran fleet rained fire from above, taking down Selphar strongholds. Rebels hidden within the Empire rose up, striking at their oppressors. And in the center of it all, Jace and Lyra fought side by side. "You planned this?" Jace asked, dodging a plasma bolt. "I improvised." Lyra spun, slicing through an enemy. "Didn't you say humans adapt?" Jace grinned. "I knew I liked you." They pressed forward, cutting a path toward the palace. Because this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about taking down the Empire. And it started with the Monarch. Lyra wasn't weak anymore. She wasn't just a princess. She was a warrior. And before the sun set, she would be queen.